Chords and Coffee, coming to you from the music store. You know, the last couple of Chords and Coffees we've discussed, for lack of a better term, the art of accompaniment and collaborating and playing music with folks. Speaking of collaborate, look at these leaders here. Store manager Emmett, assistant manager Marlo. These are the two leading us on into victory here in Springfield. Look, we got matching drink containers. There it is. We do it all. Anyway, the art of accompaniment, the art of, specifically, I wanted to give you like a cool blues thing that you can do. I was thinking about what we did in Kansas City. Jared, Spencer, say hello to everybody. Hey. There they are. And I was thinking about just giving you maybe 3 levels of that. And I want to do it on this Reverend Contender. Look at this thing. That's a gentleman's guitar. I like it. It weighs nothing. And it plays good. And it's got P90s, which I'm partial to. So we're going to do a little blues lesson here. And we'll do like an easy, medium, and maybe something just a little more embellished and fancy. So away we go on that. Say hi to Amber really quick. She ain't there. She's a-working. Perfect. All right. I'm going up to the cabin. Blues in 3 different ways. Somebody's coming through the door. Let's see who this is. Oh, one of the repair guys. Blues in 3 different ways. So the first way would be the standard 8th note. Chug, 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 chug. Which, if you don't know that, there's absolutely no shame in that. Hold on a second. I'm holding this guitar in the most awkward manner possible. If you don't know that, totally fine. I'll show it to you, and you'll know it forever. And it's movable in any key, so that's handy. The other way will be something that's a little more jazzy, for lack of a better term. And it'll be something that you can do with minimal effort, promise. But before we get started on all that, quick question for you. I'm curious, be honest with me. If the answer is nothing, tell me that. But what has been the most impactful thing that you've learned on Chords and Coffee thus far? The reason I ask is I want this content to be helpful. I don't want it to be ever a egocentric journey and just to my whimsy that, you know, avails you nothing, and it's just me talking to my camera on my phone, right? I want it to be something that's actually truly helpful. So what has been the most impactful thing or the most helpful thing that you've learned on Chords and Coffee thus far? The reason I ask is I always appreciate your direction on where these lessons and conversations should go. And so it just would really help me. Just comment below, okay? What's been the most helpful thing you've learned so far, other than the fact that we have Chords and Coffee mugs now? How cool is that? Take a quick drink. It's probably a good soup mug too, you know what I mean? It's the right size for that. All right, bluesy stuff. We're gonna do it in G. Why G? So the purpose of this is to have something where when you go to the guitar shop or you go to some kind of jam or you got a buddy over or whatever, there's some other guitar player probably in your life that you're going to be playing music with. And most every guitar player, when they're learning their pentatonic stuff, E minor, right? So if they play an E minor pentatonic or even a G minor pentatonic, and we'll unpack that just a little bit towards the end here, then they're going to sound great, right? And the whole point of playing together is you want this person to sound great. You don't want to put them through some sort of, crucible of shame so that they end up going, why did I ever play with you? Right? So, hey, by the way, playing this Reverend through a car, Skylark. Let me show you this bad boy. Look at this thing. Can you see it? Can't. Let's see. Anyway. There it is. That's a cool little amp. There's a lot of things I like about that. All right, so this thing, first of all, this is your level 1 bluesy thing. The hardest thing about this is just the stretchiness of it. The easiest thing about this is because it's movable. Once you learn to get the mechanics of it in your hand, you got it anywhere, okay? So that's what we're gonna do. Here's all it is. So you've got index finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, ring finger on the 5th fret of the A, and that's all you're holding down in terms of strings. Just those 2 guys, right? And then your pinky here is gonna hit the 7th fret of the A, right? And you can kind of think of it as, so if when I put my pinky down on the 7th fret of the A, that's, we'll call that on, O-N, on. And then just this normal sort of Green Day bar chord here, or Green Day power chord, where you've got index finger on the 3rd fret and of the low E, and then ring finger on the 5th fret of the A. We're going to call that off, because the pinky is off. So you've got this off, off, on, on, off, off, on, off, off, on, off. So off, off, on, off, on. You get the idea. That's a great place to start if you've never done that before. Do it nice and slow. We're just trying to get the mechanics of it, right? Eventually, when you speed it up, off, off, on, off, 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 on, off, 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 on. And you can honestly get away with doing all downstrokes if you want. If you want to do down up. You can do that too, right? Something about the way, just especially at that tempo. Now, as the tempo speeds up, you can't do, downstrokes the whole time, because it becomes a ergonomic disaster, right? But unless you're James Hetfield of Metallica, and that guy downstrokes really fast. Then, when you're ready to go to the next chord, you just take this whole sheboing and just move it down. So your index finger is on the 3rd fret of the A, ring finger is on the 5th fret of the D, and then pinky is coming up here to the 7th fret. And all you're doing is you're doing like a power chord, and then your pinky is adding the 6th to it. So that's what's giving it that blues kind of sound, is the introduction of the 6th, right? Remember the 6th, it's important. But anyway, it sounds like this on the C. And back to G. And then up to 7 and 9, with the pinky hitting the 11th fret. And you might be saying at this point, Nate, I love you, but dadgummit, son, that is stretchy. Again, it's your thumb. It's your thumb. Move your thumb around. So when you're doing this, right, and you're in this full stretch mode, my thumb is as if I was doing this with my fingertips. My thumb is right behind, kind of in the middle of the neck, almost just like perfectly as if the neck just instantly disappeared, I would be doing this, right? Not my thumb trying to reach over and grab anything. Or not my thumb coming too far over to where it's towards, the treble side of the skinniest high E string. Thumb placement is a big deal. In fact, again, I say this all the time, and I'm probably preaching to the choir by now with all you good folks of Chords and Coffee, but I'm telling you, if your hand hurts, check your thumb, right? Okay, so let's just call that a level 1. And if you showed up and you're, again, I'm using just being at the music store. Why is that a good example? Because if you watch the Kansas City Jam that we did the other day with Tyler and Merle, which thank you guys for doing that. That was great. And that totally was impromptu. We had zero plan to do that. It was literally like, hey, I'm here. Do you guys want to do a Chords and Coffee? And they said, yeah, what do you want to do? And, I said, well, what if we just did a jam and just talked about it? And so that's what it was. So you could do that. If somebody was going to play on top of that, they could play an E minor pentatonic scale. They could also play a G minor pentatonic scale. Well, how's that possible? Well, I'm going to tell you. Because in these chords that you're playing a root and a fifth and a sixth. Nowhere does a major or a minor third come into that equation. So you're really playing pretty neutral chords. In fact, a power chord is arguably not much of a chord at all. But what's interesting about a power chord like that, and by power chord I just mean root and five, and then when you add the sixth, sporadically there, it doesn't really change the fact of what's going on, right? It's just sort of, it's just a little bit of color just kind of getting injected in there, right? What's interesting is that in a lot of blues-based music, it is, a little quick theory for you, it's going to be a dominant seven tonal center platform as far as the music is concerned. What do I mean? The greatest point of resolution is some kind of chord tonality out of the dominant seven family of chords. And the dominant meaning like a G7, right? Or a G9, or a G13. Right? Some kind of chord like that. And what's interesting is that when you have a song or some sort of musical form where a dominant seven is the greatest point of resolution, right? And this is a lot of kind of music. Before you go, this might not apply to me. My friend, if you're listening to this applies to you. Country, rock and roll, blues, funk music, a lot of jazz, right? Where it doesn't apply is like when you're playing something that is like dyed-in-the-wool major sound or dyed-in-the-wool minor sound. Like for example, and even then we can shatter that a little bit. But for example, like that, there's a lot of ballads where it would sound weird if you were, and you came in and you were like, it might not sound appropriate, right? You could make it work. Think about at the end of Gravity when John Mayer's doing the, and he's playing that, he's playing like the G minor blues stuff. He's making that work because he sets it up way in advance. And by the time you get to that, it's not only palatable, but it feels like it's released. But back to my main point is that when you have a song that has a dominant seven as its tonal center, its greatest point of resolution, you can play the major third or the minor third or both. Gravity's actually, I didn't mean to say that, but it's actually a fantastic example where he sort of forces that towards the end. And it works, right? It's John Mayer, he's a great player, but it works over that. But a lot of times, think about, and we've talked about this before, I'm just reiterating this. The reason I'm saying all this is that it's really important. So when you sit down and hopefully I'm giving you something that you can play with a total stranger, right? And just be really nice to go, hey, I'm going to do a blues in G. And if they look at you kind of like with deer in the headlights, then you can say E minor pentatonic. And when you start to really kind of feel it, throw in some G minor pentatonic and go back and forth. Daniel Donato, great telly player. Cosmic country is his genre that he's sort of coined, and it's a really wonderful place musically where like great classic country meets kind of like Grateful Dead kind of jam. And he does this thing that he calls sweet and sour, and he goes back and forth between the minor pentatonic, that being the sour, and the sweet being the major pentatonic. Works out really well. If you'd like, I would be happy to unpack just that, because I think that whole sweet and sour and back and forth between the major and minor pentatonic could be its own lesson. And I feel like we've talked about this before. If you go back in some of the earlier Chords and Coffees, that we had a little run of pentatonic discussion. Happy to talk about it again. Okay, level 2 of this blues thing. So we got this. All right, so now after this, this kind of thing. Okay, and if you haven't done this before, this is great. So you've got, again, we're in G, and we've got basically this little shape here, which think of this as almost like a D7. But what we're going to do is we're going to have our ring finger on the 5th fret of the D. We're going to have our middle finger on the 4th fret of the G, and then pinky on the 5th fret of the B. Now, what's going on here? What is this? Well, friends, I'm here to tell you that's actually just an E minor chord. Because you've got a G, which is what you're holding down on the D string of the 5th fret. You've got a B, right, which is what's happening on the G of the 4th fret. And then you've got an E, which is happening on the B string of the 5th fret. And if I put a low E in the bass, listen. It's just an E minor. E in the G major scale is the 6th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, E. Right? And I'm playing an E minor. And if I play an E minor on top of a G chord, so even if I'm playing, but if I come up here and go, right? Terrible example. I'm not too good with my right hand thumb on the fretboard just yet. But if I play this, that little, if you kind of couple that with an E minor and a D minor, this goes all the way back to those very like first, 1, 2, 3 chords and coffees that we did. An E minor on top of a G chord gives you a G6, just like a D minor on top of a G chord gives you it's actually a G9, but a G7 type sound. So check this out. This little that we're doing, that's all it is. It's E minor to D minor, but it's done with these shapes, right? So this shape that I just gave you, ring finger on the 5th fret, middle finger on the D string, 5th fret of the D string, middle finger on the G string of the 4th fret, and then pinky on the 5th fret of the B. If I just slide this down a whole step to where this is now on the 3rd fret, ring finger, and then middle finger's now on the 2nd fret of the G, and then pinky on the 3rd fret of the B. So again, ring finger, 3rd fret of the D, middle on the 2nd fret of the G, and then pinky on the 3rd fret of the B. Right? So you've got this G6 to G9. It's only a G9 because I have this A in it here. But if I do it over a G note, now when I get to this, you'll notice that I'm switching so I can get this G note down here. So my ring finger is actually, or my middle finger is actually coming over to the low E to play the 3rd fret of the low E, while my first finger is playing on the 2nd fret of the G. So you've heard this before, right? And then now take this whole sheboing and slide them up to now I'm on the 8th fret with my index finger. Ring finger is going to be on the 10th fret. Index finger is on the low E, 8th fret. Ring finger is going to be on the 10th fret of the D. Middle finger is going to be on the 9th fret of the G. And then pinky is going to be on the 10th fret of the B. And then, just like before, I'm going to slide this back. But when I slide this back, I got to do this little change here to keep this bass note going, so that my middle finger is going to come down here to the 8th fret of the low E, and then index finger is going to be on the 7th fret of the G. Watch this video again. If it doesn't make sense now, you watch it a couple times, you go, okay, I'll get it. It's like a bicycle thing. You just got to get on the bike a few times. And then back to the G. And guess what? I'm here to the 10th fret. So again, index finger, 10th fret of the low E, ring finger on the D string of the 12th fret, middle finger on the G string of the 11th fret, pinky is on the B string of the 12th fret, and then this whole thing comes down a whole step. And again, these fingers got to switch, so middle finger comes down here on the D of the low E, so 10th fret of the low E, and then index finger lands on the G string on the 9th fret. And then, so that's like a level 2. And what's really great about that is because now you're introducing more chord tones, because you've got a 6 to a 9, right? This 6 chord to this 9 chord, right? And it's the same 9 chord as like the James Brown 9 chord that we've done a lot, right? Now that you're introducing more tones, what's really cool is that the richer the harmony gets as you're accompanying someone, the less wrong notes there are for them to play. And so, 2 schools of thought on that. There's a guy that comes in all the time named Jen, who's a great jazz guitar player, and he likes to play very little when he's playing with another melodic instrument like guitar, so that he gives them maximum amount of space, right? And I think that's great. I think there's room for all these approaches. It's sort of situational, right? But a lot of times, if you're playing with somebody that you might perceive they need a little nudge, melodically, or maybe they need to know that this net will catch you if you fall. I will give them, some denser accompaniment. But I don't want to get in their way. And so if I start to feel like I'm doing too much, you just got to pay attention and try to help the other person sound as good as they can without getting in the way or interfering. And part of that is just, you got to start somewhere, right? So give yourself permission to not be great at this at first, and just keep doing it. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm still learning, right? So speaking of still learning, let's do the 3rd level. Okay, so we've got the 6s and the 9s. So let's add a 13, right? And a 13 is the same as, a 6th. It's just an octave up, right? But there's usually a few more notes that go into this. And so I wanted to show you this guy here. This is a really cool shape. All right, so here is what we're calling our 6th shape, right, for the G6. There's also this one, and there's a lot of different variations on this theme. There's this guy here, right, like from Lenny, Stevie Ray Vaughan. By the way, if you guys ever want chord charts, you know this, but I'll say it again. Just send me an email, NateWhite, NateWhite, at palenmusic.com. So this shape here, this is kind of cool because this is a similar idea, but what's interesting about this and why I kind of differentiate this from the other is that this one has no root, or doesn't have, it doesn't have the G as the root, okay? So this one, we're actually using the F as the root, and the easiest way to think about this is make a good old E minor bar chord up here. So I've got my index finger laying across the 7th fret of the A to the high E, and then I've got my middle finger on the 8th fret of the B, pinky is on the 9th fret of the G, ring finger is on the 9th fret of the D, right? E minor. Speaking of Metallica, right? E minor, right? So you're going to take that E minor shape, and what you're going to do is you're going to unbar this, and then you're going to put your index finger on the 9th fret of the A string, and so you're holding down that F, and you get, so it's like an E minor with an F in the bass. What? What's really interesting, this may be the most important thing I say in this Chords and Coffee, what I'm about to tell you right now. What's really interesting is I remember the first time I played that, and I was like, I remember the first time I saw this. There was a John Scofield video. I mean, I love John Scofield, fantastic guitar player, big influence on me, John Scofield. He was playing a Telecaster, and it was like a blonde Tele. And he was at a music store, and he was just noodling, you know how you do. And I remember seeing him do this grip, and I remember telling my guitar teachers, like, "What's he doing?" He goes, "Oh yeah, that's a 13 there." And I was like, "How is that a 13?" He goes, "Well, the root is on top, right? And then you got the flat 7 on the bottom. And then you got the major 3rd, and then you got your 13. I was blown away. I ain't even thought about that, right? Well, you can just stick any note you want to on the bottom of the chord. Well, sure. Called inversions. Have at it. Talk about that too if you want to. But in the meantime, that's a cool grip. It's a cool grip. And so what you can do is, I don't know, I just made that up, right? So I did that little 13 thing like that a couple times. Then I went up here, and then down here, I like to do this one too. So this, stay with me. I feel you. You're kind of like, wait a minute. Stay with me. Come on now. All right. We went from this E minor down to this D minor, right? Remember we talked about that just a second ago? This is an E minor. This is a D minor. Right? So if I'm doing E minor to D minor here, and this 13 that I just showed you is basically an E minor, right? I could slide this down to this D minor here, which, by the way, I think there was a Huey Lewis song called She's Hot and Soul. Had that kind of move to it. The song was actually written by Exile, I think, but Huey Lewis covered. Fun fact, back to it, rabbit holes. Instead of doing that regular D minor, sometimes I like to do this. This is a quartile, meaning there's no thirds to it, it's all fourths, and you have your index finger. We'll talk about that in a whole other day. You have your index finger across the A string to the high E string, straight across there, and you're just going to put your middle finger on the B string of the 6th fret. And that's it. That's all she wrote. It's a fun little grip. You can do it quick. Not a lot of thought required on that one, right? Just a quick little grip. So I was going. Something like that. So you got that little 13 shape, that guy right there, and then I just went like a C shape. So basically just took my finger off of this, and then a little working man's blues, where you got your index finger laying across from the D string, the G string, and the B right there, and then hammering on that major third on the 4th fret of the G. So one more time. Maybe do the same thing. And that would be for the C, sort of the formula that I use in my head for how this works is that when I'm doing this shape here, I want, knowing that this is the flat 7, I'm always just a whole step behind where I'm trying to be. So I would do the C shape starting on the B flat up here. Does that make sense? So I know that's a lot of chords being thrown at you, but that's kind of a juicier level 3. If you want these chords written down for you, email me, natewhite@palenmusic.com. If you have questions about that, but I think that's enough to work on there. I have a little turnaround for you, just real quick before we go, just real quick. So when you get to the, let's see. Maybe just go back to this. But I just thought of this the other day, and I think that's kind of a cool little thing. So we've done this A minor 9 shape a lot, and so you've got your middle finger on the 5th fret of the low E, skipping the A. You've got your ring finger on the 5th frets of the D, pinky is on the 5th fret of the G, index is on the 3rd fret of the B. And you're going to take actually this guy off, but you're going to put it back on. I just want to show you kind of where my mind is thinking when I play this. I'm going, and that little lick is going from the 5th fret of the G to the 4th fret of the G. So pinky and index are facilitating that. 5th fret of the G, 4th fret of the G, switching from pinky to index. And then I move my middle finger to the 5th fret of the A, I'm sort of making this big D sus kind of thing and putting my index finger back on this. So, right? And I end up on a let's see, middle finger is on the 5th fret of the A string. Ring finger's on the 5th fret of the D. G is accidentally open, but I ain't hurting nothing. And then index is on the D note of the 3rd fret of the B. And then I did that little classic. And that's G bar chord. And you can also just go. And so like play a G and then just play the notes on the A string. 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, D. Maybe a little, I'll show you that chord in just a second. Or you can go. And so think of this as, I know it's a lot, but I'll write it down for you if you want. Middle finger on the 3rd fret of the B. Ring finger on the 4th fret of the G. Pinky on the 5th fret of the D. And then index finger on the A string, 2nd fret. So it's G over B. And then just a good old-fashioned C bar chord, except I've got my pinky instead of my ring there. You can use your ring if you want to. Right. Wait a minute. I don't think I even played this chord. I just played the note. I may have played the chord. So this would be a C sharp diminished 7, which we have actually talked about in past Chords and Coffees too. This is middle finger on the 4th fret of the A, and then ring fingers on the 5th fret of the D, index fingers on the 3rd fret of the G, and then pinkies on the 5th fret of the B. And then that last D you hit, that's actually, you can count. And that, I'm just thinking of this as D9, so where you've got your middle finger on the 5th fret of the A, index finger is on the 4th fret of the D, ring finger is going to lay across the G, the B, and the high E on the 5th fret, like that. That's where we're resolving to. The tension right before is pinky is on the top 2 strings, E and B. Something like that. Anyway, there's some different blues in G that you can use. Again, I really, really love your feedback and direction from that. And if you could, comment below so far on the Chords and Coffee videos that you've seen, what has been the most helpful or impactful. And then also, again, if you have questions, you're like, Nate, you got to send me those chords. I'll handwrite them out on a chord sheet, take a picture of my phone, and email it right to you. Just send me an email. I'm happy to help. And you know you can always get a hold of us too. If you call, especially during the week, you'll probably catch me or my buddy Nash or any one of us, Emmett and Marla that you just saw, Spencer, Jared, so on and so forth. We appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you for giving up your Saturday morning like you do to watch this. And also, look, coffee just tastes better than one of these. All right, we'll see you next week. Appreciate you guys. See you soon.